Sweet, thanks for coming tonight. I'm sure more people will be rolling in, but we're excited for this. I've been really pumped about tonight and being able to hear Jason teach us. So first of all, tonight I just wanted to highlight the fact that everyone that sold last summer with Pointe got paid today. So let's give ourselves a hand for being payday. You guys worked super hard. Everyone online, really proud of all your hard work, and we're really grateful for you and that you're a part of our program here. So I wanted to do a couple intros tonight. So Jason's obviously our keynote speaker tonight, and he's going to take the majority of the time. I wanted to kind of introduce how I met these guys. My dad lives really close here nearby in a townhome. And every morning my dad gets in the Provo River, even in the winter, he like punches a hole in the river and gets in. And Bronson Kafusi, who played football for BYU back in the day, if you don't know him, you probably don't know sports. He was an amazing defensive end at BYU. But anyway, him and my dad connected and started cold plunging in the morning together. And so I met Bronson through my dad, and Bronson is awesome. We've become good buds, and he's been working with these guys now for a while. But I wanted to kind of draw a little bit of a correlation between today, which is payday, and a story that Bronson told me earlier today. I thought it'd be kind of a cool thing to kick this off with. So a lot of you guys that sold, even if you sold a couple of summers, you're all still young and trying to figure out how to invest your money. And I remember my first summer, got my first back-end check, and I was like, dude, I've never had, even if it was 10 grand, right? It's like, I've never had money like this. And so I'm gonna have Bronson come up and tell a really cool story about when he signed his very first deal with an NFL team. Bronson played in the NFL for a while, and I think there's some cool correlations between you guys getting paid today and this funny story that Bronson told me. And then after you tell this story, I'll introduce Jason. So.
Thanks.
Actually, I guess you don't need
to. You're good. Okay, so I want you guys to think of your first job you ever had, like actual job, right? My job, I grew up here in Provo. Days Market, anyone done Days Market in here? That was my first job, bagging groceries, right? I was a checker. I definitely climbed up the ladder, you know, from bagger to checker, that was it. So, but I remember getting paid and I was like, this is awesome. Like, name on it, first of all, I get a check, like this is sweet, right? And then, you know, I've had other jobs, odd jobs, and but for me, I didn't really make a lot of money to that point. Like I never thought about investing. I didn't grow up in a family that was investing money. Like everything was month to month, everything was tight, right? And so for me, when I was playing sports at BYU and I got drafted by the Ravens, they call me, or obviously they call me the night of the draft, right? And tell me that they're drafting me. Then they call back that night later on, and they're like, "Hey, we're flying you out here, and you're gonna do a press conference, and then from there, we're gonna fly you back to Provo, and you're gonna have like 5 days, and then you're gonna come back for rookie minicamp." So I get flown out there, and I show up. Anyone been to Baltimore? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of our markets is in there. Yeah.
Is Baltimore?
So some of these guys have sold in that.
Oh, you guys have sold there? Owings Mills. Anyone been to Owings Mills? Ricerstown Road? I don't know. So the Ravens facility, it's called the Castle, right? It's sponsored by Under Armour. Under Armour's from there, right? And it's awesome. It's super nice. Like it's very executive feeling walking around, I would say. And I remember walking in there, and they're like, "Okay, just come upstairs real fast." And I go upstairs, and I'm sitting there, and they come over. I'm like, "Okay, you ready to go sign your contract?" And I'm like, "Sure." All right. I start texting my agent like on my phone. I'm like, "I just sign this right here? Like, how does this work? I have no idea." And he's like, "Yeah, just read me the numbers. And I just want to make sure the numbers are correct." And I'm like, "Okay." So I'm in there. I'm looking at it. I send the numbers for like every year, because as a drafted player, it's 4 years, right? Undrafted, it's 3 years. I read them, and then they're like, "Okay, so how do you want your check?" you want it like your signing bonus? Do you want it, you know, do you want it via, direct deposit? Do you want it as a check? And I'm like, I'll take it as a check because I know how you get paid, like today's market, right? So, and so I get this check, right? And it was a large check, right? It was a 7-figure check. I've never seen money in my life, right? Like, and this happens to every NFL player. You go from nothing to all of a sudden having money, and there's a big gap there because you have no idea what to do with it. So I was like your typical NFL player. But I changed over time, but I put that check in my backpack and walked out. I was like, this is awesome, right? I got this check in my back. Walked around Baltimore that night, right? And I hate to say that, but it's true. But that's why I can relate to a lot of people in the sense of, I wanted to grow my wealth, but I just didn't know how to do that. And so, as the years went on, like in my second year and third year, and going to my third, that's when I met Jason, but I saw my teammates losing their money. And so I was like, I need to find someone that knows what they're doing, like, so I can like be a part of what they're doing and like learn. And so that's when I found Jason and was introduced to what he was doing. And I was blown away because I loved how he was willing to like teach me and I met a lot with Jason, poor guy, but I was just blown away by what they were doing and just, became an investor and have been since. So it's been just a great journey. And so I'm happy that, I get the opportunity to share someone that's helped me so much and other people I know so much with everybody. So, and that's why Jason's here. So I appreciate you guys coming tonight, and you're in for a treat. It's gonna be awesome. So thanks.
Let's give Bronson a hand. Cool. Awesome. So just to intro Jason. So Jason went to BYU, studied economics at BYU, from Texas, right? In college, while still in college, bought a property, bought a fourplex, got really interested in real estate, graduated, started working in financial planning at Edward Jones. And Jason is an absolute real estate professional. So he was basically doing financial advisement by day and then real estate by night. But the real estate was his passion and was having crazy success as an investor in his own deals. And that net worth and passive income grew to a place where he felt comfortable stepping away from being a financial advisor. Really grew to a place where, and I read in his bio just online that he was making $1 million in passive income, still working in real estate, working as a financial advisor by day. And so happily exited being a financial advisor, got into real estate, and really now since that point, has started multiple companies, and their group raises capital. They work out of the Wells Fargo building on University Avenue here in Provo. They raise capital for big deals, and he's just an absolute real estate expert. I'm super excited to learn from him tonight. So let's give Jason a huge hand.
Hey, thank you guys. Is the mic working? Everyone can hear me okay? Thanks, Ben. I really am humbled to be here. This is one of my favorite things I get to do, is talk and teach real estate, share the things that I learned at an early age and implemented at an early age, and fortunately had some success that helped me build upon that success. And I really have seen how that compounding effect is real, not just with money and interest and the compounding that happens there, which is meaningful, but also your knowledge and applied knowledge. And by applying the knowledge and getting involved in, the whatever interests you, in my case, it was real estate, learning from deal to deal as I got better and better. And it was meant to always just be me and helping me financially retire with a bigger nest egg than what I thought was possible or what I thought I could do from a guy from Amarillo, Texas. My dad didn't make a lot of money growing up, and so we struggled financially. But in time, I realized a lot of people wanted to understand how I was doing it and how I had amassed such a large portfolio in my late 20s. And so I started to take outside capital, and a company and a firm began organically. But really, it was all meant just to be me buying real estate to own and control a larger amount so that I could have a nice income to support a nicer lifestyle in the future, and hopefully do some good things for others along the way too. So very happy to be here. Parker and I share a lot of interest in the passion for real estate and what it can do. And I've been fortunate to have some really great mentors in my life too that taught me how to do real estate in a very attractive way from a tax shelter strategy aspect, and trying to lower your risk but keep the outsized returns coming in. And so I've looked into a lot of different asset classes in real estate. I'm going to talk about some of those today, but primarily what I love to do is value add multifamily. So that could be a 4-plex, an 8-plex, 12-plex. It started small. Now we're doing 100 to 300 unit type sizes of apartment complexes, but it's the same strategy: ugly and old, fixing it up, improving it, finding its highest and best use, stabilizing it at higher rental rates for cash flow, and selling it for hopefully a larger profit because it's worth a lot more now than it was when you bought it because of the capital improvements or the better efficiency the property is being run at. And so I'll give you a case study of one that we did here in Salt Lake and go through that. This is totally informal. If you want to stop and pause and ask questions, I'm happy to do that. We'll probably save some time for questions at the end as well, but if there's something that you'd like me to explain a little bit better, just let me know. See if I can get this to work. This is a disclaimer. When I was a financial advisor, I always had to give. I will share a lot of different things on tax strategy and asset protection, and so please make sure you speak to a tax professional or an attorney before taking action on any of this. This is something that we know well, and we can even share different professionals with you if you have interest, but I will be talking a lot about that, so please consult with your professionals first before you do anything. This is a little bit about Harris Investment Group, where we are today. Just over 400 million of portfolio value that we manage, over 3,000 units. Most of those are in Texas, Kansas, Missouri, and Kentucky. Those are our 4 biggest markets. Started in Utah. We still probably have 400 units here, but the majority of what we do is in those 4 states. Being a boutique asset management firm, I think that puts us at an advantage of having outsized returns to maybe some of our peers. Partly because when you have too much capital to place, you're forced to look at tier 2, tier 3 type opportunities. If you have great deals and not enough capital to put them in, you're able to stay in the best of deals. And we're still a younger firm, and that gives us, I think, a little competitive edge compared to, say, a Blackstone, where they're managing billions of dollars. They're going to have to lower their return projections because there's not enough great deals in the market to even be had. And so we've got a good experience and background. Matt Denning, Jesse Yates, who's here. A lot of us have been in the wealth management game. I was a financial planner in the past. Jesse spent time as a financial planner as well, wanted to go an investment banking route, and has raised money for other asset types. And so Matt Denning's run a $10 billion fund for AIG. He came from Wall Street, institutionalized a lot of our processes. So that's a little bit about our team. The 61% IRR is not something that we market, but it is historically what our track record is. We've benefited from a great bull market, and we're entering a different type of market in this current cycle. And so we guide to a 20% return in our growth fund. And I'm going to show you a deal that we hope to work together with you guys on, that we're projecting a 20% IRR, although I think there are some ways that it'll be higher and better. We're just being more conservative because of the current market we're in. Chuck?
Some folks here may not know what IRR stands for.
Oh yeah, so an internal rate of return is a compounding return each year. And so just to make the math easier, a 20% IRR over a 3-year period, if you were to invest 100,000, after 1 year it'd be 120 grand, just like it would be if you were doing an AAR, average annual return. But compounding, now your 120 grand is put to work and achieves a 20% return. And so instead of it being 140 the next year, it'd be 144,000. And then 3 years, it'd be $172,800. There's a compounding element instead of 160. And so that's a compounding return every year. If your money were to stay in Harris Investment Group and compound over time, that's what we've been achieving over the last probably 20 deals that we've closed. Again, we don't believe that that's going to continue. We're in a different market than we were then. But things were really exciting, achieving those types of returns. So good question. Any other question on that? Here are the historical returns. I'm actually going to pick just one that hits the mean, the average of 61%. It's a deal that we did actually in Salt Lake City that I'd like to kind of break down to show you kind of how we approach finding good opportunities. But this is historically the last, 20 deals that we've done. And so we keep a track record that we provide to wealth management groups that we may work with, family offices, individual investors, or teams like you guys where we're hoping to raise capital as a team and put them all in one. It's called a TIC structure, which just allows us to pull capital and be one entity that can go into a property together. And then you get paid out pro rata based on what your ownership interest is of the property or of the entity. So if you own 10%, you would get 10% of the cash flow, appreciation, tax benefits, so on and so forth. So that's just a little bit about our historical deals. Here's the markets that we're in. The core markets that I spoke to that we're doing multifamily are really here. All the others that you may see are primarily gas stations and truck stops. There's a really unique tax shelter component to those because of the oil and gas. I'm not really going to talk about that a lot tonight, but we are in other asset classes. We do some land development. We've got a big project in Bear Lake. We're building 251 townhomes on the south side in Utah, just about to go vertical. Got a clubhouse, pickleball courts, fitness center, business center, and 25% of them are going to be eligible for VRBO, Airbnb use. The others are going to be second homes or primary residences. But it's right close to the lake, and we'll have rooftop patios where you can see the lake, and hoping to figure it out to put hot tubs on the top and grilling stations just to have an added space there. That's not a part of the square footage, but a cool space. And so a little bit real quick about my background, and I want to be careful with time. Do we have an hour?
Yeah.
Roughly? So about
great.
time. Okay. Like I said, I came from Amarillo, Texas. My dad struggled financially. His dad, my granddad, retired at 55 on a pension plan, and my dad hoped to do the same thing. So my dad was a very loyal employee, but when 2001 tech bubble hit, they downsized. He was laid off, and he wasn't as high a tenured employee as some of the others, and so he spent 9 months looking for another job. The 2008 crisis, he had to pull equity out of his house at the worst time when values were low, pulled money out of his 401k. He didn't know better. He didn't have the financial literacy, but really made a lot of mistakes that if he had more understanding of how investments and finances worked, could have made some different decisions that would have put him in a much better position now. Well, as a kid, I was seeing these things happen, and money was typically tight. In our house, it was all about frugality and making the dollar stretch. And so I had a very strong defensive mind that when I go to start my own career, I'm going to live on as little as possible so I can keep more of what I make, and of what I keep, make it work hard for me. And that's what I was set on doing. And when I was 16, I opened up a joint account with my dad at a brokerage firm, ironically Edward Jones, which I later worked for, and had a relationship with a financial advisor that I sat down with every year to see, based on how much I was contributing to my account, what that could mean for me in 40 or 50 years, because I was so young at the time. So I took my $5.15 I was earning at Pizza Hut. I don't know if Dave's Market you're making more than I did, but I'm pretty sure I was pretty much.
Barely.
Barely. Beat me on the high end or the low end? I worked my way up to $5.65 as the shift manager, so I never got any meaningful bonuses. But what I was good at is putting 75% of everything I earned into the joint account to invest in the mutual funds. I had 3 mutual funds I invested in. And by the time I came up to BYU, after my mission, I had about $19,000 that I had invested and saved and had grown. And fortunately, the market had done well. So the investment returns were good. But that was the money that ultimately I looked at that helped me get started in real estate. I absolutely hated paying rent to the landlord. Like, it drove me crazy. It was my biggest expense. And I'm this nerd that geeks out on numbers, but I would go to the annual consumer spending surveys that are put out by the Bureau of Labor Statistics every year, and they break down what the average expenses are for Americans. And housing is our number one cost. Typically, the next is transportation. And so, taxes, housing, and transportation are the three biggest expenses. So for me, being in the frugal mindset, doing everything I could to increase income and reduce expenses, I was all about the defensive side. I wanted to cut back anywhere I could. And I looked at it and said, okay, where does my money go most? Well, like everyone else, it's in those three big categories. And so I didn't want to have any housing cost or transportation cost. So I had this idea, my mom shut down. I was going to buy a mobile home that was 7 years old, because at that age, they don't lose their value anymore. And then I could like hop around to find the cutest girls. And then once I found the best spot, I would just park it. And anyhow, my mom's like, you'll never get married if you're driving a mobile home around. So luckily she saved me from that, but I found the cheapest place to rent. And then I calculated how much the landlord was making there. And I thought, I have to get into real estate. So at an early age, I had an appetite to own real estate. I didn't know how, but I had read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'd read a lot of books on real estate and other investment books. And I knew real estate needed to be a part of my wealth strategy. So when it came time for me to start spending money, I wanted to own the place that I lived. So when I was in school, I had an opportunity. It was actually when I married my wife. Her parents were going to buy a fourplex, and I wanted to see if I could go in on it with them, own a quarter of it, and they would own 3/4 of it. But at the time, my 19 grand wasn't enough to be able to buy into it. I wasn't even familiar with leverage and getting a loan and how the financing aspect of that could help me own and control more. But ultimately, I took them out to dinner. I pitched them. They're probably thinking, oh, this poor guy, he's the one that married our daughter. How are we going to help him and her get through this? And so they were nice enough to say, yeah, let's talk about it. But in that process, I learned through the real estate agent that I may be eligible to buy my own property if I was willing to live in it. Well, when you're in your early 20s, you're living in an apartment anyways. I was totally fine living in an apartment and owning it and renting out the other 3. And so I found out that an FHA loan allows you to buy or borrow up to 97% of the price of the fourplex. And so fortunately found a fourplex that was $434,000, $19,000 was my down payment. I literally had $6 in my bank account after it closed. And there were some really cool tax credits and other credits I got that helped me have a little bit more money back. But I really was willing to gamble it all, essentially, because I was worried putting that much money into it and having no liquidity at all. But it helped me get started. And I knew the savings was there because the other 3 units of rent income covered all my expenses. That's how I got started. What I didn't know, but fortunately worked out, in 2 months, I had my $19,000 back. I had a credit from the security deposits of the tenants. My first month, I didn't have to pay a mortgage payment, so the rent income I was able to achieve. The prorated that you achieve when you close, a proration of property taxes of what the owner who you're buying it from was supposed to pay in property taxes throughout the year as a credit. And at the time, there was a credit from the Obama era where your first time home buyer credit was an $8,000 tax credit that I applied for. And since I was living in it as my primary residence, in 2 months, I had 19 grand back. It's the velocity of money where I was able to keep the asset that took care of itself, get my money out of it, and then take my money and go invest it in new opportunities. And so my mind was blown. Literally, I was so stoked what real estate was doing for us, because now, at that time, I was making like $2,700 a month, almost $3,000 a month from rent, that all I had to do was wait till the end of the month, and then I got to collect the rent income, or go work as hard as I could in the sales job that I was in and make about the same amount I was making just by owning the asset. And so it just blew my mind, passive income or income like that versus the hard-earned income that I was accustomed to. And so I wanted to buy as much real estate as I possibly could. That's how things got started. I started buying a deal or two every single year, and in time started to partner with others that were investing with me. If any of you have heard of Bigger Pockets, I think my wife and I are episode 286 with Brandon Turner and David Green. I see him at conferences all the time now, but you can go look it up. What I was doing in 2016, 2017, I was still a financial advisor at the time, working my way out of being a financial advisor to do real estate full time. And so anyhow, that's a little bit about my story. Definitely focusing on real estate being the passion, but focusing on the frugality. And so getting back to that, when I was in my 20s, I wasn't fortunate enough to work for Pointe and make the type of income that you guys have the potential to make. I made between $30,000 a year up to my later 20s, about $80,000 a year. And even still finished before I was 30, having over $1 million net worth because of the real estate investments that I was making and because I started early. And that's continued to compound and work for me. But had I had higher income, I think that could have done it in a better way. Yet at the same time, I had a very low value on my time spent on my job. And so I allocated a lot of my time outside of my job to investing in real estate, which eventually became what I do full time now. And it's what I love and I'm passionate about. So I'm going to stop there for a second, then I'm going to explain a little story on that and then how that and what that may mean for you guys. Any questions on that so far? I know I've shared a lot there. Yeah.
Just a quick one. I know the market was very different back when you were buying that fourplex.
So different,
So-
unfortunately.
Right. So right about now, that same fourplex would probably sell for more than double. What would
It would.
like what? How can you relate that to our situation? I guess.
Yeah, good question. So the question is, how can you relate that to today's situation? Because then prices were a lot more affordable and debt was a lot cheaper. And both are a lot more expensive. In fact, you could say interest rates have more than doubled, even 2.5x, and prices are probably double to 2.5. And how can someone get started in a market like that? It is entirely different landscape than when I got started. And that's more just dumb luck. I was fortunate to have the money and get started at a time after the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. I bought my property in 2010. That was when I had the money and was ready and could start. So with that being said, I bought mine for $434. I sold it for $830. It's probably worth over $1 million, despite interest rates now climbing to 7.5%, 8%. It's so much more difficult to get started. I'm going to answer that in what I was going to say anyway, so let me kind of get to it, and it'll kind of make sense. If you can make something pencil, because you have to have a place to live, trying to own versus renting typically is better. Now it's more challenging than ever, but if you're able to rent out your house and buy a single family or a duplex and make the numbers work close enough, there's great financing available for owner-occupied borrowers where you can put a very minimal amount down. And my wife and I, what we did is I had her get a real estate license. And so when we bought property, I negotiated credits that I was able to achieve in way of commissions. And so we literally do no money down deals because my wife would act as the buyer's agent representation, me. I'd go get the property, put 5% down, get 5% back, because I negotiate a 5% buyer's agent commission. And then I'd negotiate the lender, the seller, to cover the closing cost at closing, so I didn't have to pay any money. And then I'd go take out a HELOC and use the line of credit against the equity in the property to pull out capital and use the capital to go buy more property, or fix up my current property to improve the value, which I'm going to explain that we do now, so that the $434,000 fourplex I own could be worth $600,000 after a $40,000 investment of what I borrowed from a HELOC and borrowed from commissions. So literally, the velocity of compounding was real for me because I was doing a lot of deals and I was very aggressive, but I was good with my numbers, meaning I was aggressive, but not aggressive to where I felt like I could lose everything. I was calculated with my numbers to make sure I could justify borrowing the $40,000 at that time at 4 or 5% interest rates and go take the $40,000 and make a lot more with it using arbitrage, where I could make a 10 or 20 or 50% type of return and keep the difference after paying the 4% interest rate to my HELOC lender. And that's how I was able to compound. And as I was doing that, obviously we were making money because my wife represented me on the buy and the sell. And so it's a lot different now, but let's explain a little bit why what we do could be beneficial while things are different in the current market, because all markets are cyclical and it's going to change. and there's going to be opportunities again. I think right now is probably one of the most difficult times where things are the most unaffordable than they've ever, I mean, maybe not ever been, but
In like 50 years or
Yeah.
40 years.
yeah. I mean, they've gone back even to compared to the Great Depression when prices were significantly lower. That even still, after inflation and debt cost, it's more expensive today than it was even during the Great Depression. So, I mean, things are hard for a younger generation trying to get started and wanting to build wealth through real estate or other asset classes even. So let's talk about that. It's a great question. I wanted to highlight real fast, being defensive, me making 30 to 80K, how much money could I possibly save if I was like a super saver, living on as little as I possibly could? What's the maximum I could probably save with that type of income? Let's say it's 80K a year I made on the high end during my 20s. What's the most I could save? 60, and that would be just a terrible life, right? Like, how can you even afford food?
Yeah.
I mean, really,
Saving 60 on 80
I
don't know what you're
That's the
doing.
75% principle. I like it. That's what I did when I was young, but then my parents paid for all my expenses, so it was possible for me then. Right? It would be really tough. But let's say that was possible. And it's not. It really isn't possible to save that much. But you get the point. It's a limit to how much you can save. So 5K a month would have been the absolute best. And that really isn't that possible, right? So probably more like $2,000 to $2,500 if you're really living lean. But I was all about sacrifice today for a greater tomorrow. Or if you live like no one else will for 15 years, you can live like no one else can for the rest of your life. Like, that was my mindset. However, I also started to realize I need to focus on expanding my means. What's the limitation on your income potential? There's not really, right? I mean, maybe at some number it tops out, but really, you guys are in an industry where you can make 7 figures if you wanted to. If you committed to this industry and became the very best you could be, 7 figures is possible. I meet guys in your industry that do that, and it's incredible, the income potential. So I recognized I need to be good on the defense, but I have to find ways to increase my means. And by increasing my means, I will have more available to invest and build my wealth, because that's what I wanted. And this is what did it for me. And I'm just going to skip to this and then get to the actual meat of what I'd like to say. What do you think the number one reason the wealthy invest in real estate is for? Who said that? Taxes, tax savings. That is the number one reason. And most people think cash flow, passive income, they think could be, building wealth and equity. But the majority of the wealthy people I know use real estate as a tax shelter vehicle because it's a great asset that has strong returns, but it's a very tax efficient investment to own. And it was in 2013 when I was a financial advisor. I represented an affluent family here locally, and I saw they sold a project for a $20 million capital gains, just like a business for a $20 million or a stock sale for $20 million, and they didn't pay a dime in taxes. Not a single dollar did they have to pay taxes on. And I thought for sure they were doing something illegal. I thought I don't want to be a part of this, but I reinforced my knowledge and understanding of the tax code and how real estate can be a very meaningful tax shelter for wealthy when utilized correctly and in certain ways. And when I knew that I didn't have to pay taxes again when living in America, if I owned real estate and utilized it in the way that this family was, I knew real estate was the secret sauce for me to have the ability to grow my wealth. And I dug deep, and that's when I started taking massive action into owning more and more real estate. And you can see, if you look at my track record and how many deals I did starting in 2014 and on, it was a significant number. And I took on capital outside of my own, because when you're making 30 to 80K a year, there's not a whole lot of leftover money to go buy real estate deals with, right? And I recognized that my income was a limitation to what was possible. There were more good deals out there than there was income I had to chase them. And to be able to still chase the good deals, I needed to find other people with money. And I'd much rather take a percentage of something more than 100% of nothing, because I wasn't going to be able to do the deal on my own. And that's what changed everything for me. And so that's when I started taking in outside capital, and I recognized tax savings was a very meaningful part. I heard that Parker went into a lot of these recently, so I'm not going to go into much of that just for the sake of time, but I'll highlight those in one of the case studies that we're using, which is White Pines. This is actually a 56 unit in Salt Lake. I'm going to use some of the examples of what we do when we're looking for deals and how we look for them to show you how real estate can be a very, very meaningful return compared to other assets that you could invest your money into. And by the way, again, I was a financial advisor. I still max out my retirement accounts each year. I invest in stocks and mutual funds. It's important to me to diversify. I want to do things outside of real estate and not have all my eggs in one basket, so to speak. However, real estate is what I lean into because of the tax shelter strategy that it offers me, that allows me to keep more of my hard-earned money and not have to pay as much to the IRS, so that that money can go in towards my wealth strategy and allows me to then invest all things Roth. Who knows why I would, or you should, be investing in a Roth account versus a traditional IRA or traditional 401k? Yes? Yes, absolutely. The compounding is tax-free. So if you look at being as young as you are, being able to invest post-tax money, meaning you have to pay taxes on the contribution going in, but if it can compound for 40 years, 35 years, 50 years, however long before you think you'll draw money from it, imagine how often that compounding can happen. In fact, most stock investments say that you can average 10%. If that were true, take the rule of 72, 10 divided by 72, it takes 7.2 years for your money to double. I'm just going to say 7 years because it makes the math easy. So $5,000 can turn into 10, to 20, to 40, to 80, to 160. $5,000 can turn into 160 grand over a 49-year period if you let it double 5 times 7. Oh, that's only 7. It would be 2 more times. 160 would be 320, would be 640. $5,000 could be 640 grand. Would you rather take out 635 grand tax-free by doing Roth? Or do you want to pay taxes on 635 grand by doing traditional? That's the difference. And when you're young, letting that compounding growth happen tax-free makes all the difference. So what does Jason Harris do? I love investing all things Roth, so my stocks and mutual funds can grow tax-free while investing in real estate that I use as my tax shelter vehicle. Meaning, I get all my tax deductions through the real estate, so I don't have to pay taxes on my contributions that I put in my Roth. I'm playing both sides of the field and getting the benefits of both. And you should too, and you can. And when you understand and learn the tax code better and have a CPA that helps represent you, you can utilize the tax code to your benefit. And there's a lot of things that the government wants to do to incentivize you to do these activities because it solves problems that America has, affordable housing being one of them. And that's something that we're helping create jobs and create a lot of places for people to live. Because if the government runs the housing projects, it ends up becoming the slums and there's a lot of crime and it just creates more problems than the private market who runs them. Yeah.
So if you're able to minimize risk with like real estate investing and you get higher ROIs with real estate, like in a position with us, like I can take all my cash and go in real estate get a better return than putting it into a Roth and letting it sit for 49 years. I guess, would you still diversify or just dump it all if you can minimize that risk?
Good question. And I don't think it's a simple answer to say blanket answer for everyone because it may be unique to everyone's risk tolerance and goals. I will say for me personally, I've maxed out my retirement accounts every year when I could as my goal, knowing that because Roth accounts are post-tax contributions within an IRA, you have access to the contributions always without penalty. So if I have the ability to put it in the account and still access it if I need it, it's only the growth that's subject to a tax penalty or an early withdrawal penalty. I know that I can still use the money, but if I don't need the money, I can at least have it in the account growing, because once the year's gone to April 15th of the following year, you lose the ability to contribute to that year. So it's not like in your future, when you're making a lot more money, you can go backwards and say, hey, I missed out on 5 years. I want to go max all of them out. That's not possible. So for me, I wanted to contribute to them and know that I could access it if I needed. And I did access it a couple times for real estate deals, because the real estate deals were so good and attractive. It was worth my money being in the real estate than that of my IRA. And so it's almost a mix of both. I'm not really giving you the right answer, but it's understanding how is this money going to best serve you in your wealth strategy, and is the money going to do better staying in the Roth account growing, or would it serve you better being in the real estate or another option? And I think that's the best way to really dissect it to understand. Great question. Let me explain though why I like real estate, because I understand the return potential that I may make. So White Pines is a great example of this. I'm just gonna make it easy for me to do the math for you or with you here to give you a better example. We do a lot of bigger projects than White Pines. So let's just say it's a 100-unit project. White Pines had an opportunity for us to add storage units on the back of the parking lot. And we were able to predetermine, running the numbers, what our return on investment would be if we added storage to the parking areas, if the tenants were willing to pay 20, 30, 50, 80, whatever the number. And so we did a survey, and the tenants of White Pines wanted storage and were willing to pay $50 a month for an 8x4 storage unit that we could build at about $1,000 per unit. So if it was 100 units at $1,000, that's a $100,000 expense. Well, if we could get $50 times 100, it's $5,000 a month, times 12 months, 60 grand. That's what type of return on our money? 60,000 divided by 100,000, 60%. Is that a good return?
Yes.
To me, that's a great return because it's a reliable return. I'm not putting 100 grand into Amazon stock hoping that it goes up by 60%, which, by the way, is possible, but not likely. Most stocks don't perform that aggressive, although they can, and they can do far better, but they can also go to zero. There's that type of volatility. This is a predictable return. Now, what makes it even better, and why we love doing that, is we're value-add investors that are not typically keeping the property for cash flow. Now, earlier, and I'll explain what that means. I love the velocity of money concept, right? Invest the 100K. How long would it take me to get my money back if I'm making a 60% return on that investment? Just over 1.5 years, right? With the income potential that it's providing me. That's pretty good. Anything that you can get all your money out of and continue to get the income within 2 to 3 years is a really good return on your money. However, it is so much better than that. Why? Well, when we stabilize properties like we did on White Pines, we held it for 24 months, 2 years. So our timetable was short. Most of our projects are a 3-year duration or less because we want to find all the problems of the property, fix the problems, improve the property, stabilize it at its highest and best use, maximum cash flow or net operating income, to then position it to sell for maximum sales price, maximum profit. So when I increase the income of the property by adding storage by $60,000 a year, how much have I increased the property value? Well, there's a way that you can actually figure that out. You just take net operating income, the income of what you generated, 60,000, divided by cap rate. Cap rate in Salt Lake during this time was 5%. It's probably more like 6 or 6.5% now. Equals value. So $60,000, I'm going to say a 5% cap rate just because the math's easier. It's a 6.5 is what the real number should be. But 60,000 divided by 5% is $1.2 million. Meaning, if I pay $1.2 million, I can get a 5% return on my money at a 5 cap. Does that make sense? $60,000 is 5% of 1.2 million. Follow me? That means if Salt Lake is a 5 cap market, I can invest $100,000 that generates $60,000 of storage unit income and then sell the property for $1.2 million more because Salt Lake demands a 5% cap rate on real estate deals. My 100,000 turned into 1.2 million. I 12x'd my money, not a 60% return. That is the power of value add multifamily real estate and other forms of value add creation. So when we look at properties, we're looking at places that we can best place our capital in capital improvements that yield the strongest returns, so that once we position it to stabilization, we're able to keep it for cash flow or sell it for maximum profit. So White Pines, it cost about $10,000 for us to renovate the units here. That same $100,000 would allow me to renovate 10 units. And each unit we renovate, on this one, we were able to generate $400 a month higher income. So $400 times 10 is $4,000 a month. 4,000 times 12 is $48,000. 48,000 divided by 100,000 is 48%. Is that a good return? Yeah. Is it as good as storage units? No. The reason why, also, when you do interior renovations, do you have to kick tenants out or have it vacant for a period of time? Yes. And so there's some opportunity cost of vacancy. So really your 48,000 in the first year, maybe more like 36,000. So it's a 36% return. Year 2 is a 48,000 income amount. And so it takes a longer time for us to get our money back. The reason I'm giving you these examples is we're looking for the opportunities to place the capital that generates the strongest returns possible from the property, that allows us to extract all of the income and profit centers so that we can then stabilize the property for strongest cash flow and sell at a nice profit. That's what we did at White Pines, and that's what allowed us to get a 61% type of return, where in this case, we were able to 2.5x the return on capital or investment made, which is about a 61% return. Any questions on that? Maybe before I move, and I know, we're getting real close on time. Yeah.
So when you did the survey at first, did you do just like one survey, or did you do like multiple different types of survey to find out whether the tenants wanted extra storage or not?
It wasn't as formal as a survey, although some bigger properties we will do a formal survey. It was really the property manager and leasing agent talking to tenants when the new tenant demographic that was coming in, as well as current tenants, if storage units would be something that they would see as a nice amenity, and if so, what would they be willing to pay if we added it to the back of their stall. And so the consensus was about $50. So we just had a good idea, but we started to make it as a part of the lease when anyone signed that they had to have the storage as a part of it, because the storage was a part of the parking stall assigned to their unit, and you couldn't really lease that storage unit out to someone else because a car would have been in front of their storage. And so we just made it as a part of everyone's lease in that example. Sometimes you can have standalones where it's not in front of the cars, and you may have some more flexibility. And maybe you'd say only 60-70% of the tenant profile would actually pay for it. And you can add that to the property and have it, assigned to them. So, but this one was unique. Yeah, good question. So just for the sake of time, and then if we could go a little over with questions, this is the deal that we literally put under contract. I think it was Monday. We've been talking to this group for about a month. Matt I guess Jesse, you haven't been down there, but Matt's been to this asset twice now, walked the property, toured it. We're now in our due diligence phase where we're able to do assessments of the sewer and the roofs and the conditions of the interior units. That's important because we want to know what we're getting into, and if we're accounting for all the future potential costs that we're going to have to address by buying a 1970s or 1980s build, which is usually what we're looking for. This is located in Arlington, not too far away from the ballpark. Texas Rangers, actually, who are going to the World Series, and the Cowboys Stadium. We own about 500 units in Arlington. Well, actually, this will put us, this and another deal, about 500 units in Arlington specifically, over 1,000 units in the DFW area. We have a team on the ground that lives in Dallas that helps us We travel there frequently, match there right now, actually speaking at a conference, touring some of our other properties that we own there. But this is a 180 unit deal. It's about a $16.2 million total purchase, 16.3 million, getting it at about 90,000 a door. 90,000 a door in Dallas is a good price. Most of the prices that we were seeing last year or 2 years ago were anywhere between 100 to 150,000, and even on the high end, 180,000 for a Class A type property. We're typically buying Class C. That's typically just representative of the age. These are in good markets, though. Again, we know the locations pretty well. Not a lot of crime. This is not going to be a huge problem property. It's a property that just the owner has owned it for 19 years and are divorced and hate each other and no longer want to work together. And so they're wanting to get out of it as soon as they possibly can. And so that's what helped us get the price that we wanted on this. And so this is the one that we're hoping to have Pointe come in as a part of the purchase with us, where if we have Pointe be pool capital all under the same umbrella, we're able to post renovations on the sale, 1031 exchange our money together and continue the branding together. Meaning eventually we'd love the opportunity in time to have an exclusive deal only for Pointe, that we go and buy a property together, and between Harris and Pointe, we put money in every deal that we do. We own the asset and we can even control the marketing spin. We could call it the Pointe Apartments, whatever it may be. We've done some fun things that we think could be cool, but we can also control timelines, the duration, cash flow, if we want to keep it for income or if we still want to go for growth. And we can work with Parker and others, who would maybe be the decision makers based on how much you've invested. That's the goal for us. We want to deliver and do a great job for you so that you'll want to work again with us in the future. But this is one that we think would be a great opportunity to start with. This one is more a $6.5 to $8.5 million equity raise. And so our hope with Pointe is to do $1 million to $1.5 million amount that we can add you as your own TIC, is what it's called, tenants in common entity called Pointe, or whatever name we want to give it. And when we sell the property, you get all the ownership interest based on the equity you bring. But when we roll out, we can take that plus the profits that we hope to generate, along with new capital that maybe you have available, and pull that so that we could do an exclusive deal altogether. And so this is the goal, is to do the same thing as what we did in White Pines. We're going to go and fix the interior units. We've actually budgeted $2.7 million of CapEx. I actually just got off the phone with the team. They don't think that we're going to need to replace the chiller system or there was one other thing. They've already started painting the exterior. And so that was something that we had budgeted for ourselves. But that may save another 270 grand that we were expecting to have to deploy as a part of our renovation improvements. So one of the cool things when you take an old, tired, ugly asset like these and you paint them, you put new doors, lights, and numbers on them, it really freshens them up and gives them a new look. And you just change the name to the property. It completely changes the stigma that this property could have had with tenants that are forever lifelong tenants. And furthermore, when you go and show the new tenant demographic that we're asking $300 more in rent from, all they're going to see is the new improved outside and the one unit that we've renovated. They have no idea all 179 units are ugly and old. And that's the beauty of how you market the deal and time things so that you can bring in a different tenant demographic. We're typically renovating 20 to 30 units at a time, so it's not like it's slow. We're coming in with a team on the ground that we work with that's going to renovate and improve it, try to stabilize it within 18 months. That's our goal. Sometimes it takes longer and it's going to take 2 years, but we want to be stable in 2 years so that we can then generate stronger cash flow and position the property to sell. And you do that by having a strong T3 or T6. That's a trailing 3 month or 6 months of strong rent collections, where you can prove out the model to a future buyer that that's an income that they can count on generating by buying it at the price that you're hoping to sell it at. That's why we look for a 3-year duration. Again, this is kind of what our target is. We're advertising or messaging a 20% gross IRR on this on a 3-year hold. I do believe there's ways for it to be stronger than that. We want to be conservative in our underwriting, especially in a down market like we're in, where debt's significantly more expensive. However, what were to happen in 3 years if interest rates were to go down? It's going to allow a future buyer to borrow at a lower cost. And when that happens, typically it increases the value of your property, or they're going to be able to afford more. And so that would be a good thing. We have not underwrote the deal that that's going to happen. In fact, I think Matt always has it go up by 5 bips every single year. And so we're already at a high interest rate, and we're suggesting in the underwriting it's going to have to go higher, and we'll still be able to hit the 20% IRR target. For many of you, this won't matter, but there's also going to be a 50% depreciation loss amount, roughly. So if you invest $100,000, you could expect a $50,000 write-off in the first year through cost segregation studies. Again, talking to the tax shelter strategy. For most of you, that's going to be a tax loss benefit against any passive income or cash flow that you receive. And then it carries forward if it goes unused to next year's cash flow that you may make. Some of you, if you're active in real estate investing, may be able to use that against your day job income, and that becomes a very more meaningful tax shelter loss that you can attain. Again, this is a 3-year duration. We expect or are targeting an 8% preferred. What that means is we don't get any returns and any performance fees unless you get all of your money back plus an 8% per year return on your money. So the only way we can start sharing in the upside is if we hit above an 8% preferred return per year. Then it goes to a 75-25 split, 75% of the profits to the limited partners or investors, 25% to Harris Investment Group. Until we hit a 20% IRR, that's the compounding return per year. And if we do that above 20%, then we can share equally in the profits at 50-50. There are some other things that sometimes we change that, but that's our typical model in the funds that we do for our wealth management groups and family offices or individual investors we work with. And then a 2% asset management fee on the equity that's raised. And that's just our ongoing work that we're doing on the property visits, site visits, and weekly management calls, leasing calls, construction calls. The value add process is quite intensive. I mean, we're $2.7 million deployed in less than 2 years. There's a lot of work that goes on, and there's a lot of problems that happen, and you'll want us to make sure that those get addressed and fixed timely so that we can get it to stabilization. Once we do that, we've de-risked the asset significantly, stabilized it almost as a Class B and a much stronger property. And our end buyer is going to be an institutional type client or someone that's in a different asset class than we are, that's looking for a turnkey, typically an income from their money. And that's who we want to sell it to, because usually that's where we're going to get the best price on the sell side. And so I rushed through that. I apologize. I just wanted to get through the carriages. That's what we'll probably rebrand it. We don't like the name. I mean, the name's fine, but we're going to change the name. We'll do something fun with it. That helps in the rebranding of it. So I think that's pretty much it. Jesse and Bronson are on our team as well. You can ask any questions to them also, but Parker, really, I can turn it over to questions unless you.
Yeah, let's do some questions if that's
Okay,
okay. That's
yeah.
Awesome.
Maybe I'll take it back to this. Oh, actually, you need the QR code there.
I'll leave it there.
What is that, Jesse? You set that up, right?
Yeah, so if you're interested in investing in this deal with Pointe Marketing and Harris Investment Group, then you can scan the QR code, get your name, your contact info, and we'll know that you're interested. So we can, as we kind of work closer with Parker and the team, and we can put that all together.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'll share that with Parker, and any of you, if you have questions, we're happy to talk outside of this, more specifics about the deal. But ideally, it'd be great to raise, that $1 to $1.5 million amount. Lenders only allow 5 ticks that they can underwrite as a part of the loan. And so if we're raising, say, $8 million for this deal, each of those 5 ticks have to aggregate to that $8 million amount. And so we need $1 million to $1.5 million per tick or more in order to get the full number that we're trying to raise.
So if just me on my own or one individual at Point, if we put in 25 to 50K, what kind of return could we expect within however long, like, yeah, like, could you break that down for us?
Yeah.
That's the number so you show.
Oh, okay.
On your money, that would be the.
Okay.
Yeah, regardless of the amount, the return should be the same. It just means if you're at 50K or 100K or 200K, you own a different percentage of the deal.
Gotcha.
If we, to make the math easy, if we say it's an $8 million raise and you're an $80,000 investment amount, just to make the math easy, you'd be a 1% owner. And so you'd own 1% of the $16.3 million deal. And so any appreciation, cash flow, tax benefits, and principal pay down of the loan during the 2 years, you get 1% of. We handle all the logistics. You'd be hiring us to be the asset managers. And actually that brings up a point I wanted to mention. When you're a 1099, what would you call it, owner, independent contractor, once you start eclipsing that six-figure number or higher, it's very important, I think, that you set up an S Corp, an LLC that you run your business out of. You could do it at a different income level, but around that six-figure number, because it's going to start saving you on payroll taxes, where you can pay yourself 50K or 40K even, and the rest of it's going to be allocated to business income, so you don't have to pay as much in FICA and Medicare tax. The other benefit, however, of investing in a deal like this, to come around to your question again, when you go and buy a piece of property yourself, you're personally guaranteeing the loan, and they're underwriting you. And if you're earning, say, $100,000, you're hopefully and probably wanting to write off as much as you can to pay as little in taxes as possible. But what happens when you go to qualify for the loan? The underwriters are looking at you and saying, geez, yeah, you made 100K this year, but after all your write-offs, I only show you made 40,000. And at $40,000, you only qualify for a $150,000 loan at today's interest rates, which will buy you nothing in today's market, right? And so what happens is, until you start establishing a much stronger income level net of all your write-offs, it's going to be really hard to qualify. When you invest in projects like these, you're not personally guaranteeing the loan. We use non-recourse debt, which means there's no personal guarantee. There's nothing that's going to appear on your credit that shows any debt that you're required to pay. And when you receive a 20% IRR or whatever the return is, that's all income added to your other income that you're making. Meaning it strengthens your ability to borrow in time, investing this way versus buying yourself, because one's tied to your credit where this one's not tied to your credit. Furthermore, real estate should be your best tax strategy anyways. If you're doing real estate correctly, the 50% depreciation loss, that loss can work against your passive income and in some cases active income. And you don't need to write off all the other things. Show your strong income that you're making, use real estate depreciation loss against your income as the loss. And now you can have the best of both worlds, because underwriters know depreciation is a phantom loss. That means that it's not a real loss. It's not a cash expense. Most of the deductions in the tax code, you have to spend money to get the deduction. You buy a water heater, you buy mills, you buy a car, you had to pay money to buy it, and so you get to write it off. Depreciation, you don't spend money and you still get the write-off. It's the king of all tax deductions. I last year had a $4 million net operating loss, meaning I had $4 million in losses left over after sheltering all my other income from properties, from business. And that's what I get to work with in 2023 that I know I don't have to pay any taxes on. It's amazing. It's beautiful. And I've done it for a long time, because in 2013, I learned it from an affluent family who did the same thing. And I realized I need to own a lot of real estate. And by owning more real estate, being active in real estate, I can use these phantom losses as active losses. And active losses can shelter all forms of income, including capital gains, including earned income, including passive and portfolio income sources. And that way, if you have the loss against your real estate, you can use against other income. Sorry, I went too far into that, but once you start making the six-figure income or higher, taxes are going to become a bigger pain in your life. That doesn't mean you need to stop earning money. It just means you need to understand how taxes work and how you can better protect from paying more than your fair share. And I think if you're in that levels, we're happy to talk more about how you can do that. So, good question. Sorry, went on a long tangent there.
Any other questions?
Yes.
As far as like the investments on this, I think it said like 90K a door or something. If you don't technically live in that unit, you could say you wanted to like buy like 10 units or something, you could pull out like an FHA loan to do that, like would that have straight capital, or could you use it like essentially do some kind of tax code loan type thing, or like what kind of ways could you provide that income? I guess would you say for
Yeah, the way that you would look at it is if $8 million, and it's not going to be quite 8, but if let's just say 8 million is the total raise, that's almost 50% leverage on a $16 million deal, and this is 180 units. So if you were a 1% owner in the example I gave, you would own 1% of 180 units or 1.8 units. So if you were a 5% owner, you would own 9 units of the 180. And that's how I best look at it from that way. We're going to get financing in today's market at the most competitive terms we can find. And usually it's non-recourse. And in this market, let me better answer it. If we go agency debt, which is fixed rate at a lower interest rate, we're gonna have to come up with more capital, which will be 8 million. If we go bridge financing, which has a little bit more risk, but higher loan proceeds, we may only have to come in with 6 or 6.5 million. And in that regard, you may be, instead of owning 9 units in the 5% example, you may own 12 units just because we're able to control more with less equity. So it really determines what type of leverage we get and what financing. We're going to apply for both and see which one has the best options for us, and that'll gauge which one we end up going. But your ownership interest will dictate how many units you own overall. Did that answer your question? Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, we couldn't piecemeal it and say some could owner occupy, get an FHA, and take out some of them. It's just one loan for the whole project that we'll do. Yeah. Great question. Yes.
I haven't looked into this, but can you do seller financing for commercial deals like this, or is it straight through like bridge loans?
They're uncommon, but it can happen. We have, ironically, one in Salt Lake that's currently being pitched to us if we're willing to carry the financing for 2 years. So it happens, and it may start happening more. But you have to be really careful because you don't want the underlying mortgage to be called due. You want to make sure that the seller continues to pay the mortgage. You also want to make sure that the deal still takes care of itself post the carry, meaning if it balloons in 2 years and now have to get new debt, that the new debt will support what you bought the property for. And so there's a lot of important aspects to it. But yes, it happens. It's just really uncommon, less common, I should say. Yeah. What we've tried to do is have, say, a typical traditional lender take the first position and see if the current owner will do a seller carry in second position to get higher leverage or better terms. That perhaps would be more common than the seller carrying the full amount. This is an example where the current owner does not have any debt, where a seller carry would be possible. We do try to push those directions when we can. But in this case, there's a unique aspect to the financing that's going to help us. So,
The seller in this deal owns that deal in cash?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of units.
A lot of units, yeah. And they own 2 other projects.
That's crazy.
Yeah, this one was the best deal of the ones that we looked at, but yeah,
Get divorced though.
divorced couple,
We'll get divorced.
yeah. Causing a lot of problems.
Too much cash flow.
They're getting a lot less money because of it,
Yeah.
honestly, because they could get more for this than they are. But they're ready to be done. They want us to close out before the end of the year. So that's a good point. This is going to be a 2023 transaction. It'll probably be a late December close, but we want to lock in the depreciation loss benefits this year for our investors. And we have an investor portal called Juniper Square that you can log into. We have quarterly updates that we give updates to the property each quarter, as well as updates periodically in the quarter of videos when we're on site, just to share what's going on at the property, the good and the bad. We have an annual investor conference, typically in February or March at the Grand America, that we host. And the investor portal will show all your K-1s, your tax documents, projected dates of when you should get your cash flow distributions. so on and so forth. Your equity ownership interest, Jesse handles the majority of that, and so any questions there would typically go to him, but there's a team that helps Jesse as well. What else am I missing? Yep.
What is property management like for you guys? Do you guys own a property management company?
We did, and it was an absolute nightmare. It's such a difficult space, both for third parties and for in-house. It's probably one of the most difficult parts of the job because there's just not a lot of money to be made in that. So we did have a property management that we ran in-house for several years. Then we went exclusive third party. And ironically, about 8 months ago, we hired the best regional managers of the teams we were working with, brought them in-house to clean up what we felt like was misleading information the third parties were giving us, because they have an incentive that they want to try to keep us and grow the relationship, but they often don't disclose the things that are going on at the property level, and those problems became more apparent to us. And so we've now gone to a hybrid model where we have in-house regional managers in the core sites, Dallas specifically, Kansas City, and Louisville, and teams on the ground that works with third parties, but they've reduced their fee structure from 3% to 1%, and now we keep it in-house so that we can know truly what's going on at the properties. Because when you're deploying, now we're at a size where we're doing tens of millions of dollars a year into these properties, we have to know what's going on, and we need to know when problems are occurring so that we can address them sooner. And so we're now doing a hybrid model. Yeah, good question. Same with the construction. Most of that's all third party, but we have more of it in-house so that we can control the cost and ordering the supplies sooner and making the draw process when we're getting draw money from the lender to happen, because we have more control overseeing the project. So all of that's mostly done in-house. Yeah.
What's the raise deadline? Like, when are you guys trying to get everything?
Yeah, good, thank you, good question. Jesse, do you know the date on
Yeah,
that?
probably
This is
next-
new, so we
yeah.
still have a little time, but
Probably within the next 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So you guys have time, obviously, to ask questions, jump on a call, go through more details.
we'll probably gather everyone's interest from tonight through many of you and Parker. Once we understand what that interest looks like, I think that will dictate to us, can we set up a tick with Pointe only? Because that's what we'd hope to be able to do. And then from there, we'll have an account set up where we can have money that comes into that specific entity for closing. So yeah, I think if we know what people's verbal commitments are sooner than later, and then we can actually call capital at a later date before the closing. Yeah, thank you.
Can you go to the QR code?
Yeah. Yeah, again, even if there's no interest in the deal, if you could tell us that helps us know as well. If there's little interest, I think Jesse allowed it to be open as far as a range that maybe you would consider. But obviously, there's still some things that you want to understand about the deal, I'm sure, before maybe making a formal commitment. That would be great.
Good,
Parker,
Jason.
thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for being here.